American Revolution events. You're going to learn about a few events that happened during the American Revolution. The Boston Massacre. The Boston Massacre began the evening of March 5th, 1770. It started with a small argument between a British soldier and a few colonists. It began to escalate because more colonists showed up and then started throwing sticks and snowballs. Soon there were about 50 colonists at the scene. The local British officer at the time that was on duty sent some soldiers over to maintain order. He was like, "Is something going on over there? Go figure it out, try to calm things down." But the sight of the British soldiers armed with bayonets aggravated the crowd further, and they began to shout at the soldiers, daring them to fire. "I don't think you're going to fire your gun. I dare you to fire your gun." He ain't going to fire his gun. So Captain Preston then arrived and still tried to calm the crowd down. Unfortunately, an object was thrown from the crowd, struck one of the soldiers, and knocked him down. As he fell down, he fired into the crowd. 13 people were arrested that night, including 8 British soldiers, 1 officer, and 4 civilians. They were charged with murder and put in jail. Lock them up. John Adams agreed to be their lawyer. Although he was a patriot, Adams thought that the soldiers deserved a fair trial. 6 of the soldiers were found not guilty, and 2 were found guilty of manslaughter. As a result, the Boston Massacre became a rallying cry for patriotism in the colonies. Groups like the Sons of Liberty used it to show the evils of British rule. Although the American Revolution would not start for another 5 years, the event certainly moved people to look at British rule in a different light. They really felt it was unfair that these soldiers were found not guilty. Some interesting facts about the Boston Massacre. The British called the Boston Massacre the incident on King Street. After the incidents, both sides tried to use propaganda in the newspapers to make the other side look bad. "No, you started it. No, you started it." So depending on who you ask and what you read, it will have things like, "No, the Loyalists started, the Redcoats started, no, the Patriots started." So just depend on who you ask. There is some evidence that the colonists planned the attack on the soldiers. One of the men killed was Crispus Attucks, a runaway slave who had become a sailor. He was one of the first people killed during the Boston Massacre. Another event was the Boston Tea Party. There was tea involved, but nobody was drinking it, and it really wasn't a party. The Boston Tea Party was a protest by American colonists against the British government. They staged the protest by boarding 3 ships in Boston Harbor and throwing the ship's cargo of tea into the ocean. You not drinking this tea. Boston Tea Party. They threw 342 chests of tea into the water. Some of the colonists were disguised as Mohawk Indians. It's said that this tea was like worth $1 million today. So that's about how much tea they threw into the water. Now, tea was a favorite drink among the British and the colonies. It was also a major source of income to the East India Trading Company. It's one of the places where England really wanted you to get your tea from. You couldn't get it from anywhere else, and this made the colonists mad. The Tea Act, they didn't like this. It seemed unfair to the colonies as they were not represented in British Parliament and didn't have a say on how the taxes should be done. They refused to pay the taxes on the tea and asked that the tea be returned to England. "We're not paying this tax on the tea, so you might as well send it back to the store, send it back to England. We're not going to buy it." When it wasn't, they said, "Okay, you're not going to send it back. We're going to throw the tea into the ocean. You should have listened. Now you lost the money." They also got in trouble for that too. The First Continental Congress is another event that happened during the American Revolution. The Continental Congress was a meeting of delegates from each of the 13 American colonies. These delegates served as the government during the Revolutionary War. They got together and said, hey, we got to do something about England. So this was basically our first little form of government or people taking control or showing leadership in the 13 colonies. Delegates from each colony except Georgia, don't know why they didn't show up, met at Carpenter's Hall in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They met to discuss the current situation with Britain, including the Intolerables Act, which was a punishment for the Boston Tea Party. So England said, okay, you're going to dump the tea into the water, we're going to punish you for dumping the tea into the water. The delegates took two major actions. So with the Continental Congress, they did two things. The first thing, they sent a letter to King George III explaining the issues the colonies had with the way they were being treated. And they demanded the king stop the Intolerables Act or they will boycott English goods. So they said, King George, look, stop all of this taxes, stop the Intolerables Act. If you don't, we're not going to buy anything else that comes from England. However, King George III, he was like, whatever, do what you want to do. I am not stopping this. And then, of course, the colonists boycotted. They made a plan to meet again in 1775 if the British did not meet their demands, and they didn't. Members of the First Continental Congress included John Adams, Patrick Henry, George Washington. The president of the First Congress was Peyton Randolph. Now, you have a First Continental Congress, you have a second one. The second one met on May 10th, 1775. After that, the delegates continued to meet in different sessions until March of 1781. Now, unlike the First Continental Congress, this time the colony of Georgia decided to show up and all 13 colonies was represented. They were stripping the first time and they finally got their life together. Much had happened in the previous month since the First Continental Congress, including the start of the Revolutionary War. So the first time they met, they weren't fighting, but now they're fighting the second time they met. With the battles of Lexington and Concord has already started. The Congress has some serious business to take care of. So they got together first to say, King George III, stop all of this. A lot happened. Now we need to come back together and we need to come up with some plans. So here are some plans that they came up with, or some accomplishments of the Second Continental Congress. They first had to establish an army. We're going to fight. We got to have some people to fight. They made George Washington general of the army. On July 8th, 1775, they tried again for peace by sending the olive branch petition to the King of Britain, to King George III. Yo, King George III, stop all this madness. And I will not stop. I will not stop. I'm the king. And he did not stop, so they continued to fight. On July 4th, 1776, the Second Continental Congress issued the Declaration of Independence, declaring the United States as an independent country from Britain. Woo! Freedom! Yes! They approved it, and they are now free from England. And those are the events